Hello, this is Vivica Williams, and you're watching Head to Head. Today we're talking to Gregory Michaelidis, he was the former director of speech writing as well as communication advisor on cybersecurity issues under the Obama administration with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Now he is the founder and director of Security Awareness Labs. What I want to talk to you today about is how the government should interact with the private sector and with citizens. And this is something you're very familiar with working with.
So at the Department of Homeland Security in the United States, they serve as the information sharing portal with the private sector, sharing indicators of threats, of malware, of viruses. That way, both the government systems and any entities that share with us can patch and update their systems right away and lift everybody's boat, so to speak, in terms of security.
And tell me what you did when your position was there.
So my interest, both when I was in government and now, is to help organizations speak more clearly about the nature of the threats and to talk about how it's really a shared responsibility, both for ordinary users, for employees, for business owners, and for large companies to be all involved. There's no real single magic bullet, silver bullet when it comes to cybersecurity. It has to be a shared responsibility, but historically we haven't done very well of involving the public or involving employees in a way that makes it meaningful to them. And that's some of what we're trying to talk about and improve here while we're in Ukraine for the Global Cybersecurity Summit.
So what were some of the common problems you saw with communication when you worked in the Obama administration?
What I saw in government is similar to what I've seen outside of government. Too often we're talking about cybersecurity as just a technical problem that happens to have people, when in fact what we're talking about is a people problem that has a technology component. And when you look at it that way, we should be treating it a little bit more the way we would handle, say, a public health issue, where you would test the message that you're putting out about a vaccine or a new medicine to solve a certain problem, and you can then improve upon the way you're reaching your customers. And that approach has not yet taken hold within the cybersecurity field.
So this leads me to a good question about this communication issue that the Ukrainian government seems to be having. So a couple weeks ago, they banned certain Russian websites, these very popular websites. So a social media website, VKontakte, which is the equivalent of Facebook in Eastern Europe, Yandex, and some other sites that are extraordinarily popular. And the reason the government banned these, they said it had to do with cybersecurity, with the issue of the Russian government using these to mine for information, and also to using recruitment of people to extremist type of groups. So the problem has been is that the Ukrainian government seemed to not really communicate very well why they were banning these sites. So what's your take on this and the way maybe this should have been done or could have been done better?
The issue that the government in Ukraine is facing with respect to the Russian sites is one that the United States and really every nation, if they're not facing it now, may be facing it at some point, which is where to draw the line between keeping the internet open, between having free speech and free sharing, and when does that cross the line into criminality, into incitement or recruitment of violence or perhaps terrorist acts. And countries around the world, including Ukraine, that's been on the front lines of these issues for several years now with respect to Russia, are struggling in how to strike that balance. I think that it's going to be important to be transparent with the people. My own view is to allow as much free speech as possible unless it's crossing a clear line of criminality, and then to be clear with the public what is going on so they understand the real reason behind a site being taken down, for instance, if it's an incitement to criminal activity versus just unpopular politically unpopular or unsensitive speech. But it's a difficult boundary that the countries are going to be facing for some time.
Well, I have a few follow-up questions for this. So what other things can governments do? I mean, this is a really big issue with how to cut down on some foreign governments' use of popular sites to mine for information. And I know it's a kind of a difficult line, but what other options should the Ukrainian government perhaps have done instead of outright banning these sites?
Over the medium term and long term, that countries are going to have to do better at educating and making the public aware that the internet has not brought us any kind of wonderful town square of competing ideas. In fact, there are some very hostile voices and hateful voices, and that part of our education and awareness of how to thrive and deal in a digital culture is going to be being discerning, not getting news from just one place, and being able to see what might be propaganda, what might be incitement versus what might be real news and information by comparing it to other sources. It's difficult, and it puts more attention on us as ordinary citizens, but we need to equip people to be able to understand that there's a lot of information out there, some of which is targeted to them for reasons that they may not even understand.
So now with your position with consulting, providing consulting, what type of concrete advice do you give to your clients, whether private or public operations?
I believe that in addition to transparency, that whether it's a company speaking about these issues or whether it's a government, a nonprofit, a university, that there has to be a sense of humility about what's going on, because all countries, all nations are increasingly facing these kinds of challenges, and that we need to speak to users and to the general public in simple and clear language about the nature of the threat, and that there is something that people can do individually to try and become more discerning and to get smarter about the media climate and the information climate that we're in right now, so that their first instinct isn't to just believe one source on something that comes up on, say, a favorite chat room or media outlet.
Well, thank you very much for this insight into how to better communicate with the public and the private sectors.
Well, thank you for having me on. I enjoyed it and happy to have a chance to speak here in Kiev.
And we hope we have another opportunity to speak with you.
I hope so too.
Thank you.
Thank you.